You're listening to the AI Native Dev, brought to you by Tesla.
Hello and welcome back. In this episode, we are going to be talking with James Ward once again. Hello, James.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Welcome back to the podcast. It's been seconds since we last chatted. And this is a follow-on episode where we're going to get a little bit more hands-on and we're going to take a look at a tool from AWS called QDeveloper. James, first of all, before we dive straight into the screen share, tell us a little bit about QDeveloper and some of the capabilities it has.
Yeah, and I should caveat this with I'm new to AWS, just getting into these tools, and so I'm not an expert on them. I'm learning, and it's been fun to learn these tools and start integrating them into how I write code. But here's the high level as I understand it, is that QDeveloper is an AI assistant. There is IDE plugins, so IntelliJ, VS Code. I don't know if there's other IDEs supported. And then there is in the AWS console. So if you're managing your cloud infrastructure in AWS, there's also a Q console in there that you can chat with and ask questions like list my EC2 instances or something. So it's integrated there. And then there's also a command line version of QDeveloper. And so that is my potentially wrong understanding of it. There's marketing pages that
I've
go
seen
into all
that.
the details, but
I've seen that actually. That's really interesting. Basically the CLI style QDeveloper. I have seen that. And actually, yeah, I've heard a few people mention actually that QDeveloper is particularly great when you're already using AWS services and you're coding against AWS APIs and things like that. And it's very well finely tuned on those kind of APIs and integrations.
yeah, I think so. And I've used it some for that. So I was working on a Kotlin Conf talk and was asking QDeveloper, like, how do I do this with the AWS SDK for Kotlin? And the answers it was coming up with were pretty good and helpful. And so I don't know the specifics on how it's trained, if it is more weighted on AWS specific things, but I'll go in and ask it like questions about regex and questions about, I was just asking it about the pickle configuration language, and it has general knowledge as
Oh,
well.
absolutely.
So
Yeah.
I think it's not just for AWS use.
No,
You
no.
can use it as a general purpose developer tool. AI
Absolutely.
assistant, yeah.
Let's bring your screen up, James. There we go. And we can jump in and show us a little bit about how you're using it here. And this looks like, is this
Yeah, I
IntelliJ?
should give this is IntelliJ
Uh-huh.
IDEA, yep, and with some Java code. And maybe is some background for this project that I'm in. This has been one place where I have used QDeveloper because I've been writing some code which is going into a space of things that I do not understand, which is how do I use Java with Loom with a structured task scope and do structured concurrency in Java. And so I was able to write this code, and QDeveloper did help me on some of the aspects of this. But I want to walk through some of the kind of just things that I've used it for. And again, I'm not an expert on QDeveloper. I'm still new to it and learning. But one of the
And
things,
I
yeah,
should say as well, for those who are only listening to the podcast, wondering what they should be looking at, we're on YouTube. So these episodes are best
so
viewed on YouTube. But
go
of
watch
course,
it there.
absolutely continue listening as well. And you'll be able to hopefully understand what we're doing in the IDE, but you'll have to use your imagination or you can go to YouTube for the full experience.
Yeah.
Sorry, James.
Yeah, no, good thing to highlight. You want to be able to see this. uh, Okay, there's a few things that I've used QDeveloper for that have actually helped me be more productive. And so the first one is that there are times that I pull up a piece of code and maybe even I wrote the code, but I don't actually understand the code. This happens for me a lot with Rust and Python languages that I'm not as familiar with, where I can look at the code and I can tilt my head and be like, I might be able to understand what's going on there. But here's what I do a lot with code that I'm not familiar with, especially in unfamiliar programming languages, is I just highlight a block of code and then I go to explain code. And so now this will look at my code that I just highlighted and be like, okay, here's all the things that are happening, and here's the like try with resources and why that's happening. And then, but usually the summary is one of the more useful pieces, is that what this code actually is doing, which isn't totally clear in the Java version of this one. It's more clear in some of the other versions I've written of this code, is that it's doing what we call a race, where it's making 2 concurrent HTTP requests to the same URL, and then it's returning the response from the first result that it completes successfully. And I don't know, for me, like, pretty impressive that it was able to look at this code, which is using these forks and a join, and then understand actually what was the goal of this particular piece of code. And so, yeah, the explain functionality is certainly useful. And then, of course, you can come in and ask follow-up questions and all that kind of stuff. So I think that helping me understand a code base is helpful.
And this is super useful even for whether you're an advanced developer or an inexperienced developer. Just reading someone else's code is hard. If me reading my own code from about 2 months ago is hard enough, but also code reviews. This is super useful from a code review point of view as well, right? Because particularly if it's a larger block of code, you don't need to go through it line by line. You just want to understand the gist and then identify the key places.
Yep, exactly.
Mm.
Yeah, so I think that understanding a code base, super helpful. You can also feed in error messages and be like, explain this error message. And so there's just a lot of places that I'm like, okay, I need to increase my understanding on this, and using then the chat console to explore that has been useful.
Mm.
So that's one of the areas you may have seen, and when I right-clicked on this block of code, that there was also some other things in here. I can do a refactor fix, which hopefully there's nothing to fix in my code because it's always perfect. But so I haven't used that one a whole lot.
No, yeah.
Optimize code, and then send a prompt. So send a prompt is just like you want to ask whatever about that block of code. And
Mhm.
so one of the things that we can do is say, write a test for this code, and we can see how it does with that. I haven't actually tested this before, and like we talked about in the previous episode, I don't have the LLM write my tests usually, but some people may want that. And yeah, so great. We're
It's
getting a
good.
JUnit 5 Makito test for that, and I have no idea if that code works, but we could flip over to our test file and insert that test in, and
Yeah.
actually see if it does what we expect it to.
Yeah, and this is an area, as well as documentation, other things where developers don't necessarily spend a lot of their time like adding those necessary tests at the end. I think this is a key area that actually will make projects more complete from an AI point of view by providing us these. I think we talked about in the last episode as well, the tedium parts of a developer's role that they actually don't want to focus too much time on because they want to stay doing things that they find interesting or creative. So
Like I tend to do a little bit more of a TDD style approach to how I
yeah,
write code.
yeah,
But for those that don't, probably the reason why you want to write a test for something is maybe you're still iterating on it, figuring it out, and you just want to like get some boilerplate test stuff there. But probably the more valuable thing there is that you haven't written your test, but you figure that I might as well have the test be to prevent regressions in the future. And
yes.
so that could definitely be a viable thing. You've got some existing functionality. Let's get a test set up. Let's make sure it passes. And then that will help ensure that I'm not going to regress on anything there. So.
Absolutely. And I think the human aspect of this is very good as well, because I think there's a number of places that kind of create test suites and things like that, but it's a very broad attack on a code base. Whereas with this, let's say this scenario one method is one that we understand is a very key and important golden path area that like you said previously as well may get hundreds of thousands or millions of pass-throughs through various transactions or something, and we need this to be bulletproof. We can like select various pieces and say, look, these are the areas that I want you to generate tests for me, or help me, assist me in building tests for this code. So I think this is still a very nice piece of human interaction, human assistant with AI.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so that's the kind of highlight and explain or pop over into chat and do that for. The other one that I think is probably the most common use of these AI assistants is just generating blocks of code for me. And
Mhm.
so this is a fun one where I've got all these different scenarios here. And let's say that I want to now start writing my 11th scenario. We'll see if this works, but usually as I'm starting to write, let's see if it string, and sometimes it's, hey, do you, oh, there we go. Okay.
Yeah.
So it did, I had to start getting a little further in, but it's okay. Now I'm underneath scenario 10 and it's already guessed, hey, what you want next is scenario 11. So it like figured out and then what's weird is if I start typing this like after scenario 1, then the code hint from QDeveloper is 1A. And so it's kind of wild that it like understands where I am in this code and starts like giving me this like multi-line completion.
That's really interesting, because a lot, depending on understanding the position you are and understanding what comes before and what comes after, is not something that every assistant does. And I think it's really important, particularly if you're in a method or something like that as well. But
Yeah.
that context is really
Yeah.
good to see.
Yeah. And so I think that my kind of acceptance rate on these is generally pretty low. Like oftentimes the code that I'm writing, like I've already got the code in my head that I
Yeah.
want to write. And so it's not very hard to actually just mash out the characters.
Mhm.
But there have been times where the code, the hints that come up in here, I'm totally shocked by. I'm like, how did it know that was exactly what I wanted to write?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I've found definitely some value in the code hinting stuff, especially when I'm in like boilerplate code land. But I tend to write a lot of code in Scala and Kotlin where there's not a lot of boilerplate. And so
Yeah.
I don't know, for me, the like multi-line completion sometimes is really helpful and provides a lot of value. And other times it just is a little bit of a distraction from me just like mashing out the code that's already in my head.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, amazing. Amazing. Yeah.
Yeah,
This
so
looks cool.
obviously it does have that functionality,
Yeah.
which is I think common across most of the AI assistants. Yeah, so there's that. There's a couple features in here for these slash commands.
Mm.
So I have not used these that much, but slash dev plan and implement new functionality across multiple files. I don't know what I'm sure that's useful. I haven't dove into that yet. There's slash transform if I have a project that I want to upgrade the Java
Nice.
version of, and I've heard people using that and that being helpful. And then
Mm.
there's a new one which I just filed a bug yesterday because it doesn't actually work yet, and for my setup, and it's probably because I'm like on NixOS, which is a weird version of Linux, and I don't have a GPU. But anyways, what this at Workspace does is it's supposed to allow me to ask questions about the whole entire project. And
Mm.
so I should be able to say, summarize what this project does. And then it's supposed to have actually built a like local vector database
Mhm.
of my whole entire project. And yeah, I'm still indexing. So I just filed a bug on this yesterday because I'm still indexing the project. So I don't know why it's not succeeding in indexing on my weird NixOS Linux machine. But I think once that actually works for me, that'll be something that'll be interesting to be able to ask questions about my project
Yeah.
specifically. So
With a much greater scope of context, which will provide you with a more accurate answer than if you were
exactly.
just to look at a small
Just
part.
at a
Yeah.
single file or
Yeah.
something. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And the place where I use QChat a lot, and people use Copilot and ChatGPT or Claude models for this, is it's just like trying to understand a concept that I'm not familiar with. And so
Mhm.
I'm going to try something which I haven't tried, which will be interesting to see how this does. But what this project is doing is it's doing these races of these HTTP calls. And so I'm just totally curious if I say, write a Java method that races to HTTP requests and only returns the first successful result. I'm just totally curious if it's going to come up with anything like what I have here. But this is exactly like when I'm venturing into new territory, concepts I don't understand, I just have a full-on conversation with Q now.
Yeah.
And okay, so it didn't use the
No,
new
it hasn't used the same code that you did,
it didn't
interestingly.
use the new structured task scope, which
Yeah.
this is like a brand new Java thing.
Right.
So probably this is trained on the training data set is much more heavy on completable future than
Yes.
on the structured task scope. So let me ask a follow-up. Can you do that using the structured task scope? And we'll see if so structured task scope is the new structured concurrency stuff in Java, which I think is still experimental. So I'm venturing into some pretty uncharted territory. Oh, and it
There we
did.
go. There we
did come
go.
up with code that looks pretty similar to mine. So
Yeah.
just had to give it a little bit of nudging to use the new APIs instead of the old APIs. But
What I liked
yeah,
at the bottom of that as well, it's actually, if you scroll down a touch, not only did it provide the answer plus a description as to why it works, keep scrolling. I
yeah.
think it provided
Oh,
maybe
a difference
y-
on the differences between the completable future and the structured
oh
task
yeah.
code.
Actually, what I was looking for was, I think the previous one had a reference over to Stack Overflow, interestingly. So it's nice to be able to almost give you references uh,
Yeah,
of others,
yeah.
maybe
The
questions,
sightings,
similar questions that have been put up. Because then
Yep.
you get, again, it's almost like that human involvement. Or if you want to talk to someone that has had that problem, and
Yeah.
understanding their opinion on Stack Overflow versus the general LLM
Uh,
broad.
in my experience with Stack Overflow, a lot of times is
Is it
there's
better
like
or
there's the accepted answer, and then there's the like highest upvoted answer.
yeah.
And so I do like that I can then go open up the Stack Overflow and see, is it what it's telling me, the accepted answer or the most upvoted, or somewhere in between? Or so yeah,
Yeah.
it is nice to have those
And
references.
that's where we are with LLMs as well. And a lot of the time, if it has a lot of training data in a specific way, chances are it's going to provide you that way versus something which is potentially better, unless there's some fine tuning or altered data sets that it trains from.
Yep. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, and so
Amazing.
that's the ways that I've been using Q Developer, at least
Mhm.
in the IDE. When I'm in the AWS console, I'm asking it about how I set up my cloud formation
Mm.
things, and asking it questions about my resources. And so that's a bit different. But this is where I'm using Q Developer most, is within my IntelliJ IDE, writing Java, Kotlin, Scala, mostly, sometimes Rust or Python, something else.
Yeah.
And yeah, it definitely has been helpful in especially as I am moving into areas that I'm unfamiliar with. That's when it seems to have had the most value for me.
Yeah. Amazing. James, this has been great to chat and actually get to see some real world Q developer in some live
In
demos. So
action. Yeah.
thank you very much for that. If people wanted to learn more, go and try it out, what's their best route to do that?
There is a web page on the AWS site that's like Q Developer, and here's how to get started with IntelliJ or VS Code or whatever. And or you can just, like in IntelliJ, go to your plugins and go install it, and then yeah, once you install the plugin in IntelliJ, then start asking questions. There's like a /help menu. I don't know. You can. Yeah, I wonder if we can also ask it like what should I use Q Developer for? And just like conversationally learn how to use it by asking questions. I don't know. This this is the future, right? We just like experiment
Yeah.
with this AI assistant and see what it comes up with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And oh, I should mention that Q Developer is free for developers.
Mhm.
There's like a free edition, and that's the one I'm using. So yeah, I think I'm using it for free. So I think you just need like an
Yeah.
AWS account or something.
Yeah. Amazing. Thank you very much, James. And I appreciate your insights into Q Developer, and thanks for the double session that you gave
Yeah.
us.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning in. Join us next time on the AI Native Dev, brought to you by Tesla.